Been driving all along, feel like I'm dreaming. Okay.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to Street Apologists Live. I'm your host, Vocab Malone. How you doing? Live in the studio. Today is Thursday, September 21st, 2023, 6:30 Pacific time, right on the dot. Excellent, perfect. Everybody come on in. This is the program where we serve the underserved and look into the overlooked. And I've got a special guest today with me in person, not just webcam across the internet, I don't know, ecosphere or something like that, but right here live with me. And so I'm very excited. Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about losing friends to Hebrew Israelism. You know, we cover that a lot on this program, and I have a friend here with me who that happened to. And usually, a lot of times when I talk to people who've lost friends to Hebrew Israelism, a lot of time they're in some way related to the church or Christian. This friend's a little bit different. He's going to tell you a story, and I think it'll be very interesting. And we're going to share some trade some notes and hear his perspective. And so I think you're going to definitely like this. So hit this like button, grab this link, make sure you share it, leave comments underneath. And you can always become a supporter. Patreon.com/vocab if you believe in what we do here. Hopefully you do. That's why you're watching. That's what I'm thinking. So welcome to the show, my man. Just a second. I see the little spinny thing. It's going to happen right about now. Taking a break off from ruling the entire world is my friend Tomer. Welcome to Street Apologists Live, Tomer. I'm so glad you could take time off. I heard you had to leave a council meeting or something like that.
You know it. Had to make some final decisions before, what's going on in the Ukraine. I just had to give the final button. Push the final button.
Pulling the strings there.
Yep, exactly.
Well,
I'm sure that's going to irk a bunch of people right now, me saying that, and that's the point.
Hey, that's all right. I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much for coming to the program. Mm-hmm. Can you tell people a little bit about yourself, the parts that you don't mind being on the internet?
All right. Where does it go? So grew up actually not very religious. Mother's Jewish, and that's the biggest point right now in that we're talking about is this is probably going to be more educational because I think a lot of this stuff with the Hebrew Israelism things that you see, mm-hmm. if you look at the history, for instance, a lot of it just comes from ignorance, and usually that's when all these things happen. Stereotypes, some will say there's some truth to them, but usually you see a snowball effect with the violent actions. You see a snowball effect with really just actions that are taken against any group of people, and usually that comes from a lack of education, and that's the biggest problem. I think the biggest problem in the big picture that mm-hmm. we're up against. But as far as myself, grew up in the East Coast in New York, kind of not really affiliated as a kid. Mother's side's Jewish. I was in boxing and stuff like this as a kid. My boxing trainer told me go find God. He goes, your mom's family's Jewish.
Was your boxing trainer, was he Jewish too?
Nope. He was Siciliano, actually.
Hey, all right. Hey, what's on?
Yeah, even with them, there's still a lot of cultural similarities. Big families, big families, food, and a lot of love. You know what I mean?
Yeah, historically, especially out of, I guess, if we think about the European context, mm-hmm. Italians, I think, they've had the, generally speaking, best relationship probably together with Jewish people.
Absolutely. Also, too, I was just on a trip. I was in Turkey about mm-hmm. 4 or 5 months ago and saw the Jewish history there as well. And it was the same thing, kind of very similar. It's always short periods of time if we're going to talk about like any kind of persecutions that tend to happen. Mm-hmm. There's always a mass buildup, and usually an economy collapses, for instance, and then we're looked at as the scapegoats, like other groups of people across the world. The Chinese, there's groups in Africa the same way, that are usually the ones that are the scapegoat, especially in times of hardship.
Right.
And that's usually where it comes from. There's always a build-up period, and you can correlate that and also correlate that with the Torah. And the Torah, as we see, oops.
No, it's okay. Yeah. No, you're fine. I'm just getting it a little bit closer so you sound a little bit warmer.
Okay.
Yeah, you see, that sounds really good.
Okay. So you look at like Moses, he was in a position of power. He ran away. He came back even stronger. You look at Yosef, which is actually truly my name, Tomer Yosef, Yosef Asadik, Yosef the righteous one. Same thing. He came down literally as a slave. He came down to Egypt, and as he came to Egypt, he becomes the viceroy, in a matter of 22 years? And that's the historical context that we see throughout the entire history of the Jewish people, whether it be Europe, Morocco, Yemen, Russia, as we've moved around the known world of the air quotes ancient world. These are the things that you see. Typically, the Spanish. We can also get into that. I don't know if you can look stuff up online, but there was
I can, yeah.
There was a sultan in Turkey who had specifically told the Spanish after because this is another Hebrew Israelite misconception, and this is part of the educational part of things. They make the claim that so many of them came to the New World, let's say Mexico, and you see, I'm looking at the chart that you have right here with the Native Americans and all that stuff. But it was only 500 years ago, and documentation was a big thing. Uh-huh. And it was documented that about 60% of the Jews that left Spain went to Turkey because the Sultan of Turkey was the one who decided to take the Jews and opened them in with open arms when the Spanish Inquisition was happening. Uh-huh. And I'm not saying the Jews didn't go to the New World, but right. Just numbers-wise, it doesn't make sense. Just numbers. It doesn't make sense. Geographically, it doesn't make sense. The amount of ships you would have to send over 250,000 people to the New World for them to all be over here, mathematically, it doesn't make sense, especially with the capabilities of the time. Everything that we go with as a Jew, typically, my Rabbi Levine, said to me one time when I started becoming more religious about 10 years ago, like fully Orthodox, he had mentioned to me, he said, consistency. Everything you see in the Torah, everything you see throughout history has a sense of consistency to it. It doesn't mean it's exactly the same, but it has a sense of consistency, and everything we also know in the Torah has context. And those are the two things that we really, really hold by. And I think if you look at these things from an outside perspective and you go into the historical things of this stuff or of this subject, you'll see consistency and the context. And then that way you can come to the proper conclusions instead of pulling history out of thin air. You know what I mean?
Right. So how did you first, Tomer, how did you first become familiar with the Hebrew Israelite thesis and the claims being made there? How did that happen?
Well, they're pretty aggressive. It's usually I'm like a kuzar, That's usually one of the first things they say.
Is this out in the streets of Phoenix, or where's this happening at?
New York for sure. What
borough were you in Brooklyn?
In Brooklyn, yeah. I remember coming out of coming out of the subway one time, and this guy yells at me, "Hey, you're a fake Jew." And I go, "You're right. I'm really black." It's just, it's an optical illusion, So you have to kind of play with their heads a little bit on this, but also too, don't give them any mind. Because again, a lot of the things that they're saying is taken out of context. For instance, I had one guy, he held up to me the thing that says, and it'll be taken away in ships.
Oh, yeah. Was this in New York too?
No. This was actually, where was this at? This was in the Army. I was in North Carolina when I was in the Army, because I was in Fort Bragg. And I was in Fayetteville, and there was guys that were there doing the same thing. Okay.
Hey, check this out.
What happened?
You got your first comment in Hebrew.
Told me that.
I'm going to put it on the screen for everyone to see here.
יישר כוח. כן, תודה רבה, אחי. תודה רבה. עם ישראל חי.
It looks like you got a buddy.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem. This internet, man. I try and stay off of it, but it is connecting. It's pretty amazing.
So you ran into these guys when you were in the service in North Carolina. You also saw them in New York. Mm-hmm. And probably because you had some distinctive dress, they brought you out.
Well, that's the other thing that, I don't know if them so much, but anti-Semites typically like to say. So I've had, obviously if I shave the beard off, I can change up my look. And a lot of times, a lot of anti-Semites will say, you see, they're either, the claim that will be made is they're trying to take over, and they're always in their separate group, and they're pulling the strings, as we jokingly said a little bit earlier.
Right.
Or you see they're trying to assimilate and be like us.
Right, yeah.
So, and it's just like what Benjamin Netanyahu said. So this might trigger a few people.
Yeah.
Benjamin Netanyahu said, he was like, the capitalists said that we were communists. The communists said we were capitalists.
Oh, okay.
You can't win. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And on the spiritual side of these things, I'm coming from the Torah perspective that it's a little Kabbalistic. Now, I hope not everyone goes crazy. I'm not like in the Kabbalah, like it's real, whatever, but I don't go down those rabbit holes because I'm nowhere in the position to even, you don't know what doors you're going to open.
Talked a little bit about this before. Go ahead. I'm going to move some things behind you. Go ahead. I'm listening.
So basically, I don't go down those the spiritual side of things is Hashem constantly reminds us that we're supposed to keep Torah, we're supposed to keep mitzvot, to fill in. You work on your midot, your character. You also, you're supposed to be or goyim. And or goyim translates to, it's not light of the cows, as like a Nick Fuentes would like to say. A Nick Fuentes will say, and Farrakhan, who would have thought? That's the thing. If anyone's watching this and you're on the spectrum of to believe what these people are saying, if you could take somebody like a Nick Fuentes, who is openly a white supremacist, or what they claim him to be, let's just say he's definitely not for the Jews. We can say that.
Right.
And he's completely the other spectrum of a Louis Farrakhan, and he's definitely not for the Jews.
Right.
And we all know that those two guys are completely not normal. You know what I mean? Putting it politely. That should be your clue to just kind of leave it be, to just walk away from any of these types of groups who are preaching these types of messages. And unfortunately, most of the time, that's what these Hebrew Israelite groups are doing. I've heard, and I follow some of them out of pure laughter, but I also take notes because that's what we do. We study, and if I come to the table with something, you got to come with some kind of proof. And much of the talking points that I hear these Hebrew Israelite groups make are the same ones that the same people who oppressed them also oppressed us as a people. And those same people that oppressed us, they're now siding with them against us, which is just absurdity to me. So think of the logic of that, especially when you look at the closeness of the Jewish people with many ethnic groups here in America, and with civil rights movements and lawyer work per diem, and fighting for these rights as people, and even dying with some of them, as we know the story of the Ghost of Mississippi, the two Jewish kids that were killed, along with the African-American kid. So that I think this is probably the best way to come at it with reason. To really, the idea would be is just to prevent somebody from going into a group like this. Like I've had friends, and I'm not saying anyone's names or anything like this.
Well, yeah. So in your case, you had a friend. What happened with this friend? Because we want to kind of hear the story, what happened. So, I'll set the context a little bit. Tomer had a close friend that he ended up basically losing because this person joined Charles Dowell's Straightway Truth. And I think even though you already had some awareness of the Hebrew Israelites, that put it on your radar.
Definitely.
More. So what happened with your friend?
As we all know in life, we're always searching. A lot of people, I would like to think, you're always searching for truth. I'm keeping it completely anonymous so the person can continue on with their life. I'm not trying to disrupt anything.
Right.
Just know everyone still loves you. We worry about you, things like this. But it's not just him also. There's hers that I've seen the same things happen.
Yeah.
Going into some of these other groups. And what happens is you have to separate people, to separate and control. That's the concept. That's the thing.
You're saying that's what groups with cultic tendencies tend to do.
Yes.
So how did that happen in your case? What did they do here?
There's always the talk with Dal. It's polygamy and polygamy. Whatever. You could play on words all you want. You're not Yaakov Avinu. You're not Yaakov our father, okay?
You're saying they're not Jacob?
They're not Jacob. I'm sorry.
Well, they may say if it was good for Jacob, it's good for me. They might say that, right?
Different times, and you're not those people. So that's the one thing I can say.
Well, what if I'm just saying, since you brought up polygamy, what if they say, well, there's a Jewish polygamist in Israel today. What about your people? They might say that.
Good for them. It's usher. It's forbidden. It's not supposed to be allowed. There was decrees that were made. So the Ashkenazim, and we'll get to the Ashkenazim here in a little bit, because they're about 1,000 years old, and it was about 1,000 years ago they made a decree. There's some theories, and I'm going with what's going to look like the most consistent and the most logical. Just like with the 10 lost tribes, we can also remind me to get into that one.
Yeah, okay.
We go by what's the most logical. We don't go by pulling stuff out of thin air. when you're dealing with polygamy and polygyny, or however you want to twist the words, every generation has its strengths. Right now in this generation, with all the immorality that's going on, it's really Sodom and Gomorrah, just worldwide, because of things like the platform that we're on right now. Our message should be spreading to more people because it's emet, it's the truth, you know? It's about building a better society, working on your character, and becoming a better person, whether you're a Jew or a non-Jew, whether you're a Jew or Gentile, it doesn't matter. This is what we're here for. We're all here for a reason, and you have to worship God, of course, and you also have to like fix yourself. We all have bad things about us. But with that being said, where are we at with with the polygamy thing?
Well, yeah. I mean, because you mentioned, so everyone knows there are different Hebrew Israelite groups, and some of you guys know Charles Dow. That's Pastor Charles Dow here. Look, I don't care about this book right here. Man's opinion doesn't matter. It's book right here. Okay, now if it's not in the book, okay, you're not gonna commit it for me. Okay, now I read this book for it back, so don't think you to come in here and tell me what this book says. Okay, I don't care if you're Jew, Christian, it don't matter. And that's why straight away we preach the truth and nothing but truth. Now look,
that's how it goes. Well,
if you want to get 4 wives, you get your 4 wives. I'll tell you what though, one of my wives act up, I'm putting her out. Because I don't brook no kind of nonsense, okay? And I'll tell her, hey, you're not going to be seeing too much of me more now. And she's gonna have to do without, okay? And I'm not going to lay a hand on her, but she's not going to get away with this, okay? Now, that's why you got to know, and that's why you come straight away. We'll teach you to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wives if you want, okay? And if you get too many, I may even take a couple of your hands, whether you like it or not, okay? So that's how we do here straight away. So.
That's it. Well, to that thought, I've seen video of this guy where he's sitting there and he's like bashing his wife, like giving a sermon, right? In English, we call it a shiur, like a lecture.
Yeah.
Where he's like bashing your wife in front of everybody.
I've never heard those sermons.
I'll send you some clips.
I mean, I'm not. It doesn't take much imagination
to see it.
To see it, because I've noticed whenever he goes around with the women, he goes like this. He's like Now, would you say that you're abused here, or that you feel any kind of fear or anything like that? No, sir, I do not. What about you, my second wife? Would you say that you feel secure here? Yes, sir, I do. Okay, now, would you say you're forced to be here? You're allowed to be here on your own free will. What is it? I'm on my own free will, sir. They always be calling him sir in these little impromptu interviews he does. I don't know if you've seen these.
Yeah, I saw a Reddit forum on it. Yeah. And yeah, it's just you're never supposed to. There's a concept of so what do we say when you murder somebody, right? This is kind of the Kabbalistic side of thing. But let's say you murder somebody.
Thou shalt not murder.
Yeah, right. So you can murder somebody in front of public. How do you do that? Meaning with your words.
Oh yeah, the power. Well, and we might refer to a verse that says the power of life and death is in the tongue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you think about it and you see somebody's face and it has life in it, like right now, and you say something to embarrass that person, and it causes them, like you say, to go white, like they lose their color. Doesn't matter what melatonin you have or not.
Downcast. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. You downcast. What does it do? The concept is it rushes the blood from the face. That's a form of murder. You're speaking lashon hara. You're speaking with a wicked tongue, and that's the most important thing. Is when you do that, you can murder somebody's reputation. Let's say the Chafetz Heim. I don't have any of his books here with me.
Who's that? Could you say that slower?
Oh,
who's that?
Chafetz Heim. He was a rabbi in Poland, he's one of the great leaders of the previous generation. He foresaw what was going on with the Holocaust. He had mentioned on how, in let's say Warsaw, for instance, there came a point because Jews started shaving their beards, they started dressing like the Goyim, Gentiles. Again, it means nation. Goyim means nation, by the way, for the record.
Yeah, it's in the Bible. Yeah. You view him as like a prophetic figure, this guy?
No, every generation we have great leaders. Like, I can tell you one of my great leaders. I was on the phone with him today in my personal life. He's my personal rabbi who I really became, when I say frum, it's Yiddish. And we can get to the Yiddish thing because Dahl and some others say it's German. It's a mix of every language. How do I know this? Okay, my wife, her family, her father's family, half of them have been in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, for 26, 27 generations, documented. The other side of the family came from Egypt, and I think there was maybe somebody from Yemen we saw, and like Greece, Morocco. There's a story behind that, which we can get to.
You talking about your family now?
No, I'm talking. My family is basically it's half what we will call Yeke, German, and then the other half would be like Libya, Algeria. So parts of
Sephardic?
Sephardic, yeah. Or that's the other thing. The Sephardi is a broad name which means Spanish. When you had the split between the Spanish and the Ashkenazi communities, it was, and there's two different time periods of Ashkenazim. Some of it's folklore, some of it's the more modern. We're going with the more modern. The more modern came from Spain, and they settled in France and Germany along the Rhine River. And it started, the big one was Worms, Sphere.
By the way, real quick,
Yeah?
Christians should know the city he just mentioned, Worms, because October 31st, 1517, which October 31st is coming up here, is when Martin Luther nailed the 95 Thesis to the chapel door at Wittenberg. And because of that action, later on was called before a council and had to give basically a defense at the city of Worms. So anyways, it's a famous city in a sense within Protestant history because of some of the things that took place there with the Catholic Church.
You know, it's interesting because I went to public school. I didn't go, I did have one summer at like a Hebrew day camp when I was a kid. But, you know, public school back when we were younger, you know, in the East Coast, as you know, you were actually still learning something. So I do remember learning about that when we were kids. And also, too, like Native American history and all that kind of stuff. But that's the other, it goes back to education and knowing history and understanding these things so we don't, you know, repeat history as it tends to do, or rhyme. So what happened? Where were we leaving off? Oh, Worms and Sphere. And,
you're talking about your own family.
Yeah. And the other part was Libya, Benghazi. So parts, and then there's some, because you have to understand, in the last like 150 years or so, you had a lot of what they call Maghrabi Jews that came from North Africa, because it's called the Maghreb, and that goes to their favorite diss track against the Ashkenazim is you come from Ashkenaz. Well, where is Ashkenaz? Ashkenaz is between the river Rhine, between France and Germany. And
yes, so that's mentioned in Genesis 10.
Gomer, his son.
So in Genesis 10, if you guys look there, it's mentioned. Now what some Hebrew Israelites do is they take that and say, look, it's right here. And so that shows right there that they're not actually Hebrew or Israelite because of that. And we try to explain, no. It's because people who are Jewish went into those areas that had the name. So it's almost like saying a New York Jewish person. You're simply talking about the geographical region, but a lot of them won't accept it. Those ones are the ones who tend to view Jewish people as being of Japheth. Japhetic. So most of the One West camps, they don't view Jewish people as being Japhetic. They view them actually as being Semitic in a way because they're descendants of Esau. That's their position. Specifically Amalek. The One Westers would say you're Amalek. So there might be some reviews of this. Look at vocab sitting up there with Amalek. But the other ones who use Genesis 10, they'll say, no, he's with a Japhetic guy.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, I can say this. Baruch Hashem, I was learning, and this is probably going to drive some crazy, I was learning Talmud. And Talmud, as we were talking before, it's conversations between rabbis.
Yeah.
It's based on the oral Torah that was given to Moshe at Har Sinai. And it was written down. Why? Because the Romans were ransacking and killing everybody in Yerushalayim. We thought we were going to lose it, so you had to have understanding.
Karaite Jews, who I imagine you're probably not a fan of, don't sign off on the Talmud, though, correct?
Yeah, so it's kind of like them, and I think if I'm getting my history right, the Samaritans.
Yeah, I think that's right. So for us as Protestants, we probably have a small affinity for an element of the Karaite Jew position, and that we see close to something we have called sola scriptura.
Okay.
So the reason why Protestants, one reason is why we're not Catholics, is because we feel the Catholics are adding things to the scripture as authoritative, specifically the Pope, the magisterium, right? So the Protestant position is sola scriptura, scripture alone as the final authority.
Yeah.
The Karaite Jews, in a way, have their own version, except it's Tanakh-based, of course.
Yeah, so my Rav, who was an important part of my life.
When you say Rav, you mean?
Oh, my rabbi, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Use the words. We just like to define them.
Okay. So basically, Leibowitz, a serious Talmid Chacham, he's an amazing individual, and I have nothing but love, close with the families and all this stuff. One day he was giving a shiur, a lecture on Shabbos, on Shabbat, depending on how you pronounce. And he had mentioned, he goes, a lot of people wonder why it is that we have the oral Torah. And of course, we could tell them it came from Har Sinai, it came from Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher.
When you're saying that, you're saying Mount Sinai.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
no, I like the words.
Good.
I'm just defining it for people.
Good.
You're saying Sinai, and then you're saying Moses. Okay.
Yes. So he said this. He was like, people have to understand. He goes, there's two things to this. He goes, one, that the oral Torah written down in the Talmud, the Gemara is the Gematria, the letters that have the number and the numerical power behind them, because we all know words have power. Yeah,
in fact, I don't know if you know this, because I know you're a Tanakh guy, right? But in the New Testament, there's one place I know of, probably two if you count a passage in Revelation, actually, but one place where there's a little bit of Gematria, and it's at the end of the genealogy of Matthew. I'm just saying, just so you brought it up, it's interesting. I just want to read this. It's this right here. So he lists the genealogy of Jesus, right? Bada boom, bada bing, bada boom. And then here, Matthew says this. So all the generations from Avraham to David, Daoud? No, that's not right.
Okay. David, if you're normal. Ashkenazim say David.
Okay, David, okay. Yeah. We're 14 generations, and from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations, and from the deportation to Babylon to the Christ, 14 generations. So Matthew goes out of his way to eliminate and not include certain people in the genealogy and structure it a certain way to where there's 14 generations here, 14 generations here, 14 generations here. And the reason is because in Hebrew, that's Gematria for David, the 14, the characters.
Okay. Yes.
Anyways, I just want to show you, you might find that interesting. It's sort of an apologetic using that. Now, the Bible, the New Testament, is not filled with that, but Christians should know there is a place where it's used. Now, our perspective will be you can get carried away, but we're kind of allowed it here. Go ahead, Gematria.
Yeah, like, it's weird. So I'm not the most learned guy, right? But, I mean, a lot of these things that we're talking about, you can pick up. We call it a chumash. It has the descriptions on the side on what the different words mean, translated to English. Very, very basic, whatchamacallit. Ashkenazi Jews were never Ashkenaziites or Ashkenazi.
Oh, yeah, it's just...
They were named as Ashkenazi Jews. Yeah, exactly.
Comment.
Shani Zion. Okay, bro. Yeah, exactly. Bidiuk. That's exactly in Hebrew. That's exactly the case. Now, the other thing, too, to these guys is that we're talking, I think, like a 2,500 or 3,500 year gap between when, air quotes, the fake Jews started, Ashkenazim, and when Gomer, son of Ashkenaz, settled in these lands.
You're saying between Genesis 10 and when the supposed usurpers came. So how do you draw those connections?
Yeah, it's like, and these are the things that I'm talking about, that all you have to do is have a little bit of critical thinking, which I mean, maybe this is the problem of this generation, is we don't have the critical thinking like we used to. Well, maybe we never did. But
I do think it's worse than ever.
Definitely.
There's a real shortcut of emotion, or a shortcut of rational thought supplanted by emotion, and also, insult. So, the New Testament loves a good insult. The Old Testament loves a good insult every now and then. But ultimately, the foundation is supposed to be wisdom.
Absolutely.
When we look at this. And so our culture now, it doesn't prize those virtues in the same way. And so that's why a lot of our political discussions, I'm talking about by the leaders even now.
Absolutely.
It's insult driven. And, regardless of positions on different people, I'm not getting into that. I mean, it was already there. I think Donald Trump made it a lot worse, in my opinion.
And then people argue before that. It was even Obama did the same. You've seen, but then
some guys had a duel once.
Yeah, exactly. I think these things are classic throughout human history. Okay, how about this? Al Gore and Bush. Even, how about this? The concept of slavery in America, right?
Oh, that was serious. The Lincoln-Douglas debates.
Not even Lincoln. Let's go back to the founding of the country. It was a difference of 4 votes.
Yeah.
Tell me the difference of today. issues are almost always 50-50 in this country since its founding.
Very close.
Think about this. 1775, Vermont was the first state to abolish slavery 35 years prior to the British.
Yeah.
You know?
If everyone just would have followed suit.
Exactly. We would be in a better place.
So,
you know?
So, what, I know you're not trying to give details of your friend, but what exactly did you see the changes in your friend? Because, you may want to talk a little bit about your relationship before, but what happened? Why aren't you friends anymore? Is it your fault? Because, how did this happen?
I think I got nothing but love. And I don't think nothing happened with us like an argument or anything. But the thing I noticed is with groups like this, it's very easy to get sucked in. Yeah. What do I mean to get sucked in? You get sucked in because of whatchamacallit. What happens?
Well, they seclude, they isolate.
Separate and control. That's the most important thing. You also tend to, when you usually show up to them, you're kind of in a low point. Or you might not realize you're in a low point.
Where there's something missing in your life.
Exactly. And then what happens after that is you start outcasting other people who don't follow along with what you think.
Especially if they're taught to be, if that particular person is taught that they're essentially the lifelong enemy of you.
Pretty much.
So in the case of a Jewish person.
I remember, there's, throughout Dahl's camp, there's Holocaust denial. Eisenhower specifically said we're getting this stuff on record. You know what I mean?
Remember. So when they finally freed the camps, no one, as far as the outside, knew exactly how bad it was, and so there was a shock factor. And Eisenhower said, "We have got to record everything because future generations are not going to believe this."
And it's already happening.
They're not going to think this is true. Yeah.
Even with all these things, it's already happening.
Yeah, you brought up like Nick Fuentes. His show is filled with that kind of stuff. Here we got a good question. Walsh asked, and by the way, subscribe to Walsh Real Awakening is his channel. What was the convincing factor to your friend's decision?
I think everybody wants a sense of belonging. Now, also, too, at Dahl's camp, it's a prepper type. I'm a prepper. You know what I mean?
So, yes, you're right, by the way. Can you define prepper for the audience? It's besides someone who loves to jar everything.
Yeah, right. Which I guess there's good health benefits to it if it's in glass. So it's a sense of, and much of it I do agree with, because when you look at historically, whether it's Torah or just history as itself, there is periods where things are good and periods when it's bad. The 7 stalks and all that kind of stuff.
Mormons, there's a thing in Utah called Mormon pantries, and they're essentially prepper pantries. The Mormons have been doing this.
Yeah, and also there's we have a thing called chesed in the in tzedakah, charity, and kindness.
Chesed, loving kindness.
Exactly. Yeah. So within our communities, what we were always known for is when you looked at, let's go to 16th century Poland, 17th century Poland, where 33% of the Jewish population in a place like Warsaw. Now, I have no connection there. All the European connection I had was Stuttgart, Stuttgart, France, Strasbourg, France.
I was going to say, Stuttgart in Germany, my pops was stationed there when he was in the service.
What time frame was this? 80s, 90s?
Late 70s.
Ah, okay.
So yeah, he was there before the Berlin Wall came down. Yeah,
interesting.
And but yeah, we're going off a little bit because I was trying to get you to define prepper because you're talking about Dahl's prepper, and we're asking how your friend got into this.
So basically, I think it's a sense of belonging. There is a machismo that he definitely puts off, as we've seen with your friend on the Science Channel, Christian Science Channel, or whatever. He's had spats with him. I followed some of that. It was pretty entertaining.
Christian Science Channel.
Black guy, bald head, kind of stocky.
Oh, you're talking about Smart Christian.
Smart Christian, that's what it is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Good. So, Corey, you're talking about Corey. Smart Christian.
So
Christian Science, that's a cult, by the way.
Oh.
The Christian Science.
Never even knew it was a thing.
Mary Baker Eddy, when you capitalize it, proper noun or whatever, Christian Science is a cult started that is big on the principles of new thought, which is essentially you can think reality and type of stuff. Yeah. Anyways, it's a big cult. They're in Boston, really big. The Christian Science Monitor paper.
Wait, maybe.
Anyways,
okay, never mind. Yeah.
Smart Christian.
So he had made a point because Dahl was calling him out to a fight, like a boxing match, right? And then he had said, your friend Corey had said, and if Corey
wait, Dahl challenged Corey to a boxing match,
something like that, or some kind of physical altercation, right? And I remember Corey had said. I saw Corey had said, he was like, come on, man. He was like, I think Corey's like 48, 50, and Dahl's like pushing 60. He goes, "You're almost 60 years old. You ain't trying to fight no one." And then all of a sudden he changed his tune. And then when Geno Jennings was saying the same thing to him, like he'll smack
What the book say? Read. Now that's the Bible. That's nothing else. What the book say?
So this guy and him were having spats, as we know. And I thought it was pretty funny that when Geno Jennings said, you know, basically like he'll have an altercation with him, Dahl backtracking, "Come on, man, you're 60 years old. You ain't trying to fight nobody. We're not. Let's talk like grown men." So what I'm saying is this is another thing.
Imagine
context.
For our context, we're thinking of Jesus and the 12 disciples, right?
I don't know, but yeah.
Everyone just imagine, you know, them post Acts chapter 2. Imagine them challenging a Pharisee of their day or challenging a Greek pagan to a fight, you know, in the middle of they're having a theological discussion like Jesus had it with Matthew, say chapter 7 or something like that. And it's like, "I'll fight you guys."
So, okay, how about this? Again, this goes back to the consistency thing, right? I'm seeing a bunch of inconsistencies. I'm seeing a bunch of contradictions on top of that. Another C, right? We're seeing a bunch of contradictions. One minute you're challenging a guy to a fight. Then when somebody does it to you, you're trying to play the higher up. And this guy's a pastor. It blows my mind, even with all the censorship on things like YouTube. How does he have almost 250,000 subscribers?
Yeah, Dow has a crap ton of subscribers.
To me, that's the scary part. So somebody who's a Jew, and I've got people, you know, all my people back in Brooklyn, Muncie, New York, even here, you know, we're driving there and we see dudes, you know, blacks, whites, whoever, and they'll scream like, "Drop the F word on us, Jews." Oh,
just because you're visibly Jewish, you're saying they see you
on Shabbat for sure they see that. It doesn't.
So everyone knows within the Jewish community, if you're observant, you have to live, I believe, within 2 miles walking distance. Isn't that right? Of the synagogue, because you can't drive because you can't start a fire, but you have to walk, but you can't walk too far. Isn't that the idea?
Okay.
Do you walk to synagogue yourself?
Of course. Yeah.
Do you live within 2 miles purposely?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So
So
that's why on Saturday morning you can see the guys walking.
But wait, there is a thing by halacha.
What's that mean?
By Jewish law, you cannot go 2 miles or 3 miles, I think is what it translates to, because they go amot, like the distance or whatever, and they add it all up. There's a calculation to it. Outside the city. Now, what we have is usually it's called an eruv, and this goes back to the times of David HaMelech, King David, where the eruv makes it to where we can carry. Also, I think it goes back to Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai when we had the what do they call it? The Aron HaKodesh. The thing with the Aron HaKodesh. What's the thing? Sorry.
It's not the synagogue, is it?
No, it's where the Ten Commandments, the Ark of the Covenant in English.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah.
So like that, and they had like the deal where, you know, it was all in the center, and they had like an eruv around that also. So usually an eruv is like 2 miles, I think, something like that, or depending on the area. Like if you're in a place like Brooklyn, or you're in a place like whatchamacallit, let's say Queens and all these big Jewish neighborhoods. Maybe the eruv is bigger. I know Manhattan, it's huge. They have this huge eruv in Manhattan.
Oh, because and also
so
there's the geographical considerations, and it's probably different for rural areas as well.
Yeah, because it's outside the city limits. Once you stop seeing houses, I think is one of the laws.
So there's a way that you essentially are creating jurisdictions, so the rules could be different.
Oh, here's the reason why. With an eruv, so you can carry on Shabbat. So if I have a key to the house and it's in my pocket, and you have an eruv, it counts as, when you have it in your pocket, it counts as working on Shabbat because you're carrying something on Shabbat. It's a form of work, and that by the 39 melachot, the 39 laws, is but the 39 laws are of Shabbat. So yeah,
we know what's interesting about that. So what?
By the way, you can, no offense to anyone, you go to the New Testament and stuff. Just talk to Rabbi Toby Singer. I'll hook you up.
You want me to talk to Toby Singer?
Yeah. This stuff to me.
You got his number in your cell?
I can get in touch with him. I've got my connections.
Guys, do you want me to talk to Mr. Singer? I'd be down to talk to him. By the way, I'd be down to talk to him. Okay, so I just wanted to read something relevant to this. Check this out. This is John chapter 5, verse 8. In this is interesting, related to what you're just saying, because there's something related to what you just said, all the way back during Jesus' time. It says this: after this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades, and these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" The sick man answered, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am going, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Get up, take up your bed, and walk." Excuse me. And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Now watch where the controversy comes in. Verse 5. Now that day was the Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to take up your bed." But he answered them, "The man who healed me, that man said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Take up your bed and walk'?" So it goes on, and what's fascinating is that, you know, the account, I'm just saying, is that Jesus heals the man, but it's on the Sabbath. He tells him to take his bed and walk, but that's where the problem comes in, because he's carrying something that he's not allowed to on the Sabbath, at least according to their interpretation.
So, I mean, again, no offense, but that's why there's contradictions. Again, talk to Rabbi Toby Singer. I just sent a message to somebody in Israel who could maybe make that happen. But what happens is, I don't know the context in the sense of, to the community, if it had an arov, I can pick it up. I can move the bed if I had to. You know what I mean? If need be.
Yeah, there's nothing in the actual Tanakh that says you couldn't carry a bed mat or a bedroll on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
But what this is portraying is traditions that have made him in violation, that says you've got something that's burdensome, and so this is considered work. Because later on, I do know, and I've got the little note here right now, Mishnah Shabbat 7.2, it says there's a code that forbade carrying an object, quote, from one domain into another.
Yes.
And so that's the problem. That's what the New Testament's relating to. So I don't see the contradiction there, but maybe you can point it out to me.
Okay, so...
Because isn't that right? You can't carry from one domain to another. So if that was in effect then, he would have been violating that, right?
Yeah, there's a tractate that talks about, and I've learned some of it. I can't really comment past. There is domains, and if there's breaks in those lines, you can't carry in between. They even have a concept, how high you can, let's say I have an apple and I want to throw it to a friend.
How high you can throw?
How high you can throw. There's all these like laws with that kind of stuff. And that's also why these things were written down, especially during the times of the Romans, because if we didn't have them,
yeah, so this man
the Jewish people loses everything.
So they were worried about this man being in violation of that. But interesting story. So you're walking and you've been accosted, in your time now in 2023, 2022, 2020, you'll be accosted by these guys where they say, "You're a fake Jew," and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, but in general, I mean, to me, again, it goes back to anyone watching this, and I hope this hits your heart. There's going to be the ones who are going to say, like, I saw this guy in here say, "I lost everything to the Jews."
Oh, you saw that comment?
Yeah, okay, so show me the paperwork where that's true. I'm not saying that it's not. Listen, okay, so let's say a Jew does something bad. So only Jews do something bad? I could show you plenty. Okay, yes, we control all the banking. All 11% of us control the banking. You know,
you're being sarcastic.
Of course I am, because the banking
I'm just
system.
saying for the sake of the audience.
Yeah. Because
you know what's interesting? Jews controlling the banking in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, right. Like, you kidding me? Like,
right?
Also, how about this? We're less than, what is it? I think we're less than 10% of 1% of the world's population. Okay, maybe. How about this? Maybe we also have whatchamacallit, a lot of influence. But look at the things that we value. Why was it that Hashem gave the Jewish people the Torah? Because he went to Japheth, the descendants of Japheth, and they said, "This is your Europeans." And again, we look at the context and the consistency, right? And he says, "We want to give you the Torah, okay?" And they said, "What's in it?" And he says, "Okay, in here you can't go to war mercilessly, you can't be cruel." They said, "Listen, we don't want it. We like everything else about it."
Bobby Brown said that too.
What's that? Bobby
Don't
Brown.
be cruel, because I will never be that way to you. I don't be cruel.
Wait, who's Bobby Brown?
You know, Bobby Brown was in a New Edition, and he was in the Ghostbusters too with the Gumby haircut. He was married to Whitney Houston.
No.
Yeah, you don't know who Bobby Brown is? Okay, my prerogative.
We live in a bubble a little bit. You know what I mean? And listen,
my prerogative. I can do what I want to do. These are old R&B songs. Okay. So go ahead.
So he goes to Yepeth and them, and this is what they say to him. He goes to the Arabs, and the Arabs say, "Listen, we like everything that you say." Ishmaelites, right? In particular, this is the words that they say before they really formed into being Arabs, and they say, "Listen, we like everything that you bring to the table, but we like to be cunning." You know what I mean? They like to lie. They like to cheat. This is what it said.
Where's this account found?
So this would be back in the time of Genesis.
So can I tell? I'm going to tell you something so as a Christian, I'm just giving you my perspective. I don't like that story because it places Yahweh's decision to have a people receive the Torah based upon their own merit, and I think Deuteronomy 7:7 militates against that.
Yeah, but it says specifically it's because Abraham said he would teach it to his children, and that's the consistency.
But that's in the Talmud, right? See, that's not in Genesis. See, in Genesis, his family are idol worshippers
originally.
Yeah,
but Abraham took it upon himself when we can go with this.
Well, why does God tell him leave your family behind?
Why? Because
they're idol worshippers.
I can tell you why.
Because of a family of idol worshippers.
Specifically, if you are who you hang around with, let's say I have 5 friends. You're the average of those 5. You're number 3. No matter which way you slice it, you're going to be number 3.
Make the Christian number 3.
So you understand, like, if a guy like Abraham is sticking around with people who just can't see it, his father, Terah?
Terah. Yeah.
Terah, yeah.
I know you're saying it the right way. I know I'm saying I agree with you, but my point is that the story you're telling that it's not from in here, it's from some other place. It makes the merit upon the people. But tell me what you think about this, Deuteronomy 7.
But that's the beauty of the oral Torah, then. I guess this is the secrets that we have.
Yeah, but it can't contradict, though.
But it's not contradicting in the sense of this. Look at the consistency. When you see Jewish people, especially we're talking religious, what are we constantly doing? We are passing down to the next generations. That's the whole point of the oral Torah, is you pass it down because you have to, in order to fully absorb it, you have to fully live it also.
But let me read. This is Deuteronomy chapter 7, right? Mm-hmm. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. Mm-hmm. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. It was not because you were more in number than any other people that the Lord set his love on you and chose you. For you were the fewest of all peoples.
Yep.
But it is because the Lord loves you and is keeping the oath that he swore to your fathers, that the Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Now, here's what I want to point out. All the activity is on the Hesed of Hashem, meaning he is the one setting his sights on someone and loving them. That's where the activity is. These people are passive receivers. It's not because of their own merit, but your story makes it based upon their own merit.
No.
And that's to me, that's a problem. Even the calling out of Abraham. What did Abraham do? It just says he obeyed. But he's there amongst pagan idol worshipers, and God is the one who sets the terms of the covenant and says, "I'm going to do this,"
because he accepted it while everybody else wasn't accepting it at the same time.
But that's not in the pages of the Tanakh, though, that everyone rejected it. You don't know. So you're making it based upon the person's decision, but the Tanakh makes it upon the decision of God.
But in the big,
whom he chooses of his own free accord.
But that's part of the free choice also at the same time. When you think about historical,
well, that's a different debate. So I can tell I have a more deterministic view than you. I can tell from this conversation. So I don't want to get necessarily bogged down in that.
Yeah.
Because I feel when we do that, then the merit is from our own self, and that is a place where we can say, because I did this. But if you actually study the Tanakh, it's filled with the Israelites disobeying. It's clear that they didn't accept it. It's clear that they're a microcosm of humanity.
That was the other half of where I was going with this.
Okay.
So Hashem made the covenant with Abraham that he would teach it to his children. But nowhere along do we say, there's always, like, from a historical standpoint, like you look at a place like in Tel Aviv right now, right?
They're acting wild out there,
exactly.
bro.
You can have the insanity that goes on in Tel Aviv. And I got one even better than that. You can go to Yerushalayim
Tel Aviv.
And you you can go to Yerushalayim and Jerusalem, and you can see the same parades going on, and at the same time, you're going to see people studying in yeshiva, learning with their children, keeping Shabbos. So it's again free choice.
You're saying you'll see the faithful and the unfaithful.
Yes, there's a term. Everything in life happens. It's called midah keneged midah, measure for measure. For everything that's happening, there's like I guess we could say cause and effect, right? But measure for measures. For me personally, something hits the soul when you say that. Because if I measure out, let's say 10 ounces of gold, and I earned 10 ounces of gold in labor, it balances out to exactly what it's supposed to be. So it's the same context, what we were just talking about with Abraham and these things. Never am I going to use these things, or anyone who's really learned in it, you're never going to use it to say that you're better than somebody. Because how about this? More Gentiles are going to go to heaven than Jews, for sure.
You're saying because there are more, right?
Not just that. There's that, but also too, why can't they be righteous? That's the misconception of these Hebrew Israelites right now with this whole conversation that we had. Yeah. They're all going to sit there and say, you see, they think they're better than everybody and all these things. Not at all. Most likely, some of the, if you're not worshiping an idol, you're not killing or eating the limb of a flesh of a live animal, no idol worship, no illicit sexual behavior, things like this, illicit relations and things like this. You're on a one-way ticket to Shemaim. Like, it's to heaven. It's not even debatable.
Almost like Noahide laws for Goyim.
Yeah, but also too, these are the hardest laws to follow. Jews have to follow them. It's not like that's the misconception with this argument when people will think it's immediate. When they say chosen people, or Goyim, light of the world, we are supposed to be the light of the world. When you take, and this is for anybody, a Jewish guy can be homeless, doing heroin, and he looks up and he sees a guy with a black hat. In today's society, it's going to be a black hat. In the old days, it was, like a tunic and a velvet robe. Right. They see him walking down the street, and he's having a meaningful conversation with his son and teaching him how to conduct himself to be a prosperous person, not just in monetary terms. That's also another thing that's totally okay. There's more rules in the Torah and specifically on monetary things. Because why? Because monetary things is life. You give your life for the monetary things. I'm not saying like you really give your life in the sense of like you work for the money or worship the money. No, you have to eat, you have to provide, you have to, in today's society, you have to send your kids to school, you have to buy a car, you have to do all these things, right? That's where I was going with all that, as far as like with the light of the nations. Oh, and when you have, like I said, when you have somebody walking down the street and they see these things, that's being light of the nations. That's what it comes down to. But you can easily go and not be a light of the nations if you're doing the crazy things that we're talking about in Tel Aviv, and where Dow and all these IUIC type guys, they're all running around, and they make a valid point. They go, look at what they're doing in the land of Israel. But this is nothing new, unfortunately. You know what I mean? These things happened in the Tanakh. It happened throughout Jewish history. Every time we were in the land. And guess what? Midah keneged midah. Hashem will kick us out of the land when we act like this at the same time.
So, some of what we're talking about, and I want to get back sort of to some of the other stuff, but, from on this side, the Christian perspective, we would look even in the Tanakh and we would say, yes, but it's not our righteousness. It's his righteousness. So like Jeremiah 23:6, in his days, Judah will be saved and Israel will dwell securely. And this is the name by which he will be called. The Lord is our righteousness. And I believe the word is something like sitkanu. So it sounds something like that, I think. So he's the source and the place. And that's why it's not our own merit. It's not our merit, but it's his. But that's a larger discussion.
But wait, is this what's to come?
No, at any time, the picture is upon Yahweh's choosing, his choosing, not based upon. I mean, a perfect example is Jacob. Jacob was not deserving in any way. Well, it was God setting his mercy upon him. And what's the Old Testament say? I will mercy upon who I will mercy.
But Jacob, at the same time, he wasn't allowed. Hashem gave it to him when Jacob let his sorrow go away. When he found out that Yosef was still alive, he came out of his depression. And without that, and without the depression, Hashem was able to open his heart for him to receive the goodness that ended up coming to him.
No, I'm just saying Jacob's whole life, though, is not a picture of virtue. And more, even the problems between Joseph and his brothers, Jacob's partially to blame because he played favorites.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
I get. Yeah,
It's not, and it's not to say he's worse than us. The point is that it's God's electing. It's his mercy. It's not the merit of the recipient. And that's why I was we got a lot of stuff going on here. But I want to get back to the Dow stuff too. You want some of these on here?
No. Where do we go? A thin blue line. Realize that the Talmud is teaching tool for discussions. Many opinions. People spend lifetimes studying the opinions in the Talmud.
This right here?
Yeah, there's some truth to that, but also too they have sources. And then here's the thing. More times than not, it always ends up coming back to the final answer. You know what I mean? You'll go through daf after daf, page after page, and then you'll finally get the answer to what it is, and then they'll source it from somewhere to prove it. And then there's sometimes they just don't have an answer. But yeah.
I think they're responding to someone else
Yeah.
who asked them to explain a certain tractate in the Talmudic books, and that's not really what we're here to do, per se.
Yeah. No, I get you.
So, switching, because I think that's a good conversation. I'm glad we can have those conversations peacefully and in love.
Mm-hmm.
Switching back to this, because we can do that, right?
Yeah.
And I'm glad we can do that. Do you feel like you can, when your friend was going through his transitional phase,
mm-hmm.
could you have a peaceful, loving, respectful conversation with him about theology?
Usually it was, the classic, well, Israel has you can't be the real Jews because Israel, and I've also heard this from others, because they have the highest skin cancer rate. And at this point, when you start hearing people say things like this, or we left Rome.
By the way, the argument that people say that are trying to make to the live chat who hasn't heard this, they're trying to say it's obvious the folks over there now don't belong because the environment even is rejecting them, and that's why they have skin cancer rates. Now, a few things. Number one, it's based upon an old statistic, and it was even the stats I looked at weren't number one. It was lower than that. But I've seen the argument, and it's not even that way anymore. But it's also a really silly argument for a number of reasons. But go ahead.
How about this? Okay, so I think it was 2019, right before COVID, before everyone locked down and wasn't outside. You had, it was almost 2,000 cases of skin cancer in Israel, and I think 171 people died from it. It's a silly argument. You know what I mean? Right. It's a completely nonsensical argument to even make. The real, how about this? You go live in Europe. In the Gemara, they talk about this. After about 6 generations, you start to shift and change like you are in your surroundings. So let's say you take...
Excellent point. So you're talking about... you go through some place, and a lot of times you spend a lot of time there. You come out looking somewhat like your neighbors.
Yes. How about this?
So that's why the Ashkenazim look kind of like Western Europeans after being there so long, and that's why the Sephardic, and that's why the ones in Egypt, and there's, you know what I mean?
How about this? You take a guy who, let's say he's from Syria, Iraq, right? My mother-in-law, she's Iraqi. We're talking... So
this Mizrahi?
Mizrahi, yeah. So you probably have somewhere between the first and the second temple. That's how long my wife's mother's side of the family has been in Iraq. They only came to Israel in like 1951, 1952.
Yeah, when a lot of folks left Iraq. So Iraq used to be somewhat a healthy place.
40% of Baghdad was Jewish.
Yeah, and so those folks now, they used to be called Iraqi Jews, but now since they're actually out of Iraq, the name that people use besides is Baghdadi Jews.
Baghdadi Jews, yep.
And so the studies I've looked at, I don't claim to be an expert. Studies I've looked at where they do comparative research based upon like first century Galilean male skulls. The researchers who say this, the closest parallel in the modern world would be the Baghdadi Jews. So the idea is very similar to like a root population as far as certain features, which makes sense. They didn't go very far.
Abraham came from Kurdistan. Now they'll say Ur Kassadim down in the south towards Kuwait, yes, but his lineage came from Kurdistan from beforehand. Same thing. You're dealing with a Kurdi guy, like the Kurdish fighters we saw fighting ISIS. That's the genetics. And it's, we're at one point we were planning, and we're still planning, possibly because we're moving back to Israel soon. you can drive into Jordan, no problems. You can go into Kurdistan, no problems. Israeli license plate. 1/3 of Syria is okay with Jews because the Kurds control it. So you can cross over there. And imagine the type of history you're going to see in the people. And when you look at, like, every morning we talk about when we conquered the land of Israel and the Chaldeans and the Jebusites and the Hebusites and all these different tribes.
So now you're talking about during Joshua's time.
Yes. So now those tribes still exist. And they're very insular tribes. They're from the Levant, like the rest of us. Like the rest of the Jews are all from these areas. And the looks are like almost the same. So now imagine you take a guy like that. My mother-in-law, you take her arm, you put it up against dolls. It's the same color. It's the same color. So that argument is out the window. Is your mom Jewish? Prove it. Where's the chaktuba, the wedding things, or the wedding paper to show that they were married? Who's the grandparents? When was a Brit done? What community did you belong to? If you don't have that, you're not, it's your case isn't looking so good.
You have
so
to have some paperwork.
And then also too, you have to, again, consistency. You have to see who knows you. Like, you can go New York, California, these different places I lived, here in Phoenix, Israel, all these places, my name is known. So I'm in the Bet Din, the court system in Jerusalem for my wedding certificate, when I was married. Where was I going?
Were you married in Israel?
Yeah, I was married in Israel, yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was great. It was a lot cheaper, too.
It was cheaper in Israel?
Yeah. It's definitely cheaper in Israel. They have a better system for it because kosher food, meat is still meat across the world. It's just expensive. There's no way around it. But it was better. You got more for your money for over in Israel.
Oh,
and it was a serious. Yeah, it was serious. It was great.
Sounds fun.
So wait, where were we going? So let's go with that. The Ashkenazim, they say, like, the look and stuff that changes. Now, how about this? There's a list of all these chronological, historical things that happen along the Rhine River Valley: pogroms, expulsions. You don't think women got raped, the men got killed? You do that 2-3 generations, you're going to look different than what your great-grandparents looked like when that stuff happens.
Intermarriage, conversion.
Yeah, but like conversion, historically, it happened. Don't get me wrong. And that's why, if anyone wants to learn, it's a great book. It's called The Kuzari.
Here, let's hold that. Can I hold this up?
Yeah.
All right, I guess here's a good part to talk about it. So you want to get into teaching some history. Tell us about the Kuzari.
Yes. Now, what does the Kuzari talk about? It talks about, in the beginning, and again, going back to consistency, you had, in the beginning of it, I can even show you, you had, in the Kuzari, you had Jews that were already there in the land of what would be like Georgia, Chechnya, Dagestan, going into parts of the Ukraine in about the 8th or 9th century. And what happened was it was an argument between a Jew, a Christian, and a Muslim. And what happened was the leadership of the country and some of his like higher ups, they converted, and some of the subjects. Numbers we do not know.
Right.
But let's say a few thousand people. But eventually, I think it was the Persians conquered them, or no, maybe the Crusades, leading up to the Crusades. They were conquered. Many of the people were killed off, as you usually are. And then there's mass conversions into whatever conquers you, and that's it. But that goes back to the consistency. In every society, there's usually Jews. That's usually what it comes down to. You know what I mean? So Israel is not even on the top 10. There was a difference between temperature then and now.
This the back of this says, any bookshelf boasting an array of essential Jewish religious and philosophical texts would not be complete without Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's 12th century classic, the Kuzari.
Yep.
In dialogue format, it presents a meeting between the ruler of the Khazar kingdom and a Jewish sage who discuss a series of theological, philosophical, and ideological dilemmas that are as pressing today as they were then. Over the centuries, the Kuzari remains a fundamental literary resource due to the unique and engaging manner in which it expounds and clarifies the diverse range of basic Jewish concepts. And so this is interesting because the book goes right to left.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because it's in Hebrew. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's the English text, but then there's the Hebrew text in there. And so for that to work out, it goes right to left.
It's weird now because I read most of the time in like we're reading in the Hebrew format. So now when I'm like with an English book, it feels weird because I'm always opening it up backwards. There's another one, and it's called Crash Course in Jewish History. These are things, it's not even like philosophical arguments. They got the dates. And if you look at the bottom in the Kuzari also, on these pages, they have the sources. See, that's the other thing. These guys are just pulling things out of thin air. I want sources. You know what I mean?
Right.
And here's the other part when we were not arguing, but we were talking earlier about the what were we talking about? About the argument with Avraham and why they took it, and the measure for measure, and going down that route. They won't accept, because I've heard them say, well, your sources are made up and they're fake. And then that there's not even an argument in that, but they can't even show me any source. At least I can show you something from a book that has a consistency of going back at least 2,000 years. At least 2,000 years. Give me that argument. You picked this up maybe 10 years ago? 20, 30 years ago?
Well,
not you. I'm talking Hebrew Israelite types.
No, I get it. They could send you a YouTube video. I mean, when you asked your friend for this, did you ask him for this kind of evidence? What did he show you?
They showed, it wasn't just him. I found some disturbing stuff. It's not so much him. It's a lot of people that he's around. All the things that we talked about earlier about Ashkenazim. They made the point of, the Ashkenaz thing, son of Gomer. And
have you seen when they pronounce it this way on purpose? Ashka Nazi?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's just ignorance.
How offensive is that, though?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, when I first heard that, I just shook my head.
The best one is they're now making claims that all the Hitler's leadership was Nazis. You know what I mean?
You mean Jewish?
Yeah, all Hitler's leadership were. Were Jewish. That's another one that I've heard.
Really?
I've heard him say this stuff, and also too, like the Hitler's. He said that he knew that the real Jews were black. You know that
yes.
meme that they do.
Yeah. I have the book that it doesn't come from. So here's what I mean by that. Whenever you look, there's usually not a source given, but I have some of the books where that meme is repeated or the information, and also some of the memes sometimes will include the source. So I went and got the book. I'll go grab it right now, and I'll show you that it says no such thing. Even on a logical basis, if you look, the discussion says it was between Hitler and a soldier during Hitler's last days, and I'm like, how did he record? There's a lot of problems even in the way it's presented. But yeah, basically it says...
Shania Tzion. The Kuzari is a fable. True. That is true. It's an argument between them. But again, I go back to consistency. I'm going to run with their crazy... I hope you understand, Shani, the reason why I bring this up. Because... they've made this the whole point of this, like, me and Vocab, we talk already, so it doesn't matter. But to do the live stream is to combat the insanity that's being claimed. So I'm going to give them the source of what they're talking about. And when I give them the source, if I say it's a fable, they're going to say, okay, whatever. But you can read off and you can find the sources in the bottom of the historical context. Like, for instance, they talk about there was coins, and there was actual coins of Kuzari, and they had the Star of David on it. But that goes back to the consistency of wherever we go, Jews have typically had an influence in every society. I mean, you look at every president going back to, who was it? Up until recently, it was Henry Kissinger, maybe? It was all like waspy behind that, right? Before that.
Oh, yeah.
But you always
had...
It
seems like it was pretty waspy before
Yeah.
Kissinger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you always had Jews in positions of power.
But not so much with Trump.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm just saying, Trump he got a few guys in there. What's the joke he told me about Trump?
What's the difference between Donald Trump and a Reformed Jew? Donald Trump's grandchildren are Jewish.
Not everyone will get that, but I thought it was pretty funny.
If your mother is so, like a guy like Bernie Sanders, he'll go and he marries a non-Jewish woman.
I'm again asking you for help.
Yeah, exactly. He wants the free pickle on his deli sandwich, and he'll make a big fight about it. That's the idea of socialism right there. It's like, what more can I get from you? I already paid you, what they thought was too much, and they're just going to try and take more and more and more until they balance out the value of the sandwich. And now the guy doesn't make any money. So when you have a woman who's not Jewish marry a man who is Jewish, the children are no longer Jewish. Okay, by blood you can make that argument, but why do we hold by that? Because you get your minhag, you get your customs from your father, just like the tribes. It came down what tribe you were from your father. And where do you get how do you know that you're Jewish? Because the mother will do anything for the children. This we know. Why? From David HaMelech. When David had the two women there, and she decided, and she said, she'll give the child up before we're going to cut the baby in half. You remember this story?
Oh, you're talking about with Solomon?
or Solomon. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, you
When
know
they
about
were gonna,
Solomon.
yeah,
They bring her before, and one says, "This is my baby." The other says, "This is my baby." And Solomon says, "Don't worry, we'll cut the baby in half and give you each a half." And then
yes,
the real mother exposes herself because she says, "No, no, let her have the baby then,
exactly,
because she won't
exactly,
want the baby to die." And then when she does that, Solomon says, "Give her the baby. It's actually her child."
exactly.
So it's an example of his wisdom.
Yes, and that is again that goes back to like if these guys can't here's the other crazy thing with Dal. The guy made a video where he's like pro-Palestinian and like Jews are just like gunning down Palestinians left and right.
Oh, he's pro. That's a weird position for him to take because he's kind of like a conservative kind of,
But that ties in also to just like
Yeah.
anti-Semitism is so deep in some people, and it's like split down the middle. You're either pretty much with us or against us. It's like Bush after 9/11. You know what I mean? It's like you're either with us or you're against us, and that's the reality. Yeah, it's crazy. He's super conservative, super pro-gun. Israel, when you look at the wonders that it's done since it's, recreating in its inception, and even before that, the Jewish people, now when I say Israel, before Israel, the physical nation became a nation again, we're talking the people of Israel. We've always been innovative. We've always been creative. We're not victims. You know what I mean? Like a lot of other people will just play victim and never pick themselves up. This is who we are as a people. You know what I mean? And you see that in the state of Israel. Look at how many startups, technology, innovations that are coming out of there, So I just find that kind of interesting that he would run off and do that. Yeah.
So here's the book. Here's the book that's supposed to have it on. It's a Time Life book. And this is the page. This is the page in the spread. And if you look, it's just about them watching propaganda movies. And I think they are trying to like use this little thing as like the
reason why Jews have our face.
Yeah, well, this is so Hitler's thing was, well, this is not even a real people. This is a motley mutt people who are not any real people. I don't know if you go to the Holocaust Museum, they talk about that. And so this is one of these Nazi propaganda diagrams that shows like here's what they are. So of this, so that's Ham.
Okay.
Do you see? And this is, it says Oriental, means like Arabic person.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Because in Europe they don't say Middle Eastern, they say Asian.
Yeah.
Yeah, they call people from the Middle East Asian.
And saying this is the mixture of what they really are. You see what I'm saying? So like this is what the caption reads. In one segment of a Nazi instructional film, the genetic heritage of the Jew was purportedly traced to Oriental, Negro, Near Asian, and Hamitic peoples. Hence, the film concludes the Jew is a bastard. So that's below the villainous title character of Judd Seuss, a violently anti-Semitic melodrama, spins schemes with his crony Rabbi Lowell. So that's these are Nazi propaganda films. But that's the page they'll give. Now I went through the whole book to see if that was referenced anywhere in there. And this would be a horrible source anyway. Not that it's a bad book, but it's a Time Life book, meaning it's not a primary source.
Yeah.
You would need some kind of primary source. It doesn't exist. And it's been fact checked. So let me just show everyone real quick here. Let me see if I can flip this over. I just want to show you guys.
Conspiracy / propaganda. How close are they related? At Tomer. I know the story. Thank you. Fight the Black Hebrew Israelites I fight. Baruch Hashem, Shani. Keep it going. So
there we go.
Kessinger memo about the Igbo people being Jews. That's interesting. When I was younger, before I was religious, I dated a Nigerian girl. And she was half Igbo, half Yoruba. That's like a no-no mix, right? Any Nigerians who are watching this, they're going to laugh when I say that because they're going to say, how do you know this? So I dated a Nigerian girl when I was younger. Her mother told me where they came up with this, with the Igbo. Igbo, they try and say, is Hebrew.
Yeah, that's the leap they'll make.
Yeah, that's the leap. So Hebrew in whatchamacallit, in Hebrew is Ivri. But Igbo and there's no connection. It may be the first word or the first letter of the word. You can make that leap, yeah, but you still have 3-4 other letters that don't even match up. That don't even, you know what I mean? It doesn't even translate. They bring up the Jews of Africa. Really, he was using
real quick. This is
the
one of the fact check sites you can go to. That's from
yes,
Reuters.
That's right. She says, Thomas Sowell is a genius, and he brings that up also because he says that the Igbo, the Igbo, the Jews, the Chinese, and there's a couple other groups of people. Thomas Sowell, people probably know about this. He brings this up on how these are the people who usually end up getting they are the Menachem. these are the people who end up getting whatchamacallit, scapegoated. That's what usually ends up happening. They
You're
end up being
talking about the historical middlemen.
Yeah, middlemen, because
That's what you're saying.
usually we're always from the outside, and people are upset about that. You know what I mean? And then we come in, we make some kind of living, usually better than the next person. Like this one guy in here, Keith something, he was saying
He's a Hebrew Israelite gentleman. But
okay.
real quick, shout out to Warrior Woman for the first super chat of today's program. Thank you so much, sister, for supporting this channel and all you do. But go ahead. I want to deal with some of the other historical stuff because we'll get bogged down in the chats. But go ahead, finish what you're saying.
Just in general, the historical stuff's the important stuff because this combats a lot of this stuff. The Igbo, Akan, Yoruba, and are 99% the same DNA. Yeah, sub-Saharan, And listen, again, it goes back to, I'm not saying any of this stuff to make it sound like one person's better than the other.
Hold on, I don't know. No, I don't know if that's right though. 99.9%. These are massively large groups of people, especially in religion, the Igbo, and to have them be that, I don't think that's right because there's much genetic diversity in Africa,
especially West Africa, because you start getting into Mali with the Arabs and even East.
All due respect, I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that's accurate at all. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Also, too, look at the unfortunate human history. People rape, pillage, and kill. You know what I mean? So you're going to have some stuff thrown in there more than that.
Well, when you talk about, the African continent, such a large place, I mean, there's going to be genetic diversity. It's one of the most genetically diverse places on the planet. And there are people there who have traces of Semitic DNA, somewhat even strong, specifically down in South Africa and Zimbabwe.
Yes.
The Limba.
Yes.
Specifically. So, it's a very, very fascinating case.
So the Limba, I heard somebody make a good point about that. Slave traders going to Zanzibar, Arabs in particular. No. And I'm not saying this to be mean because, again, it goes back. This is historical facts. Were some of them Jewish? Were some of them Arab? Because Jews and Arabs have very similar DNA historically. Isn't there? Yeah.
It's which would make sense if you're even... Let's say we're tracing the biblical story. What's the root of it? Jacob and Esau. Yeah. And even out of that, Abraham is called out from people. So what would be the genetic difference between him and them? Not much. Now he's going to be like a founder of a population, but very similar. Sometimes indistinguishable. I think there's like the CMH co-modal haplotype. I think that it's a higher frequency, but I think even that can be found in it, as well as J in some Arab populations. There's a lot of overlap.
You had a gentleman on here, I think he had dreads, former Hebrew Israelite. What's his name?
Was he?
Nice guy. He was former Hebrew Israelite, and you guys were talking about DNA genetics with him, maybe about a year ago.
Oh, was it LaRon? G-Con?
G-Con.
Yeah.
You had him on here, and he was talking about it also, the same thing. There's an island off of Puerto Rico. I was just talking about it a couple Shabbases ago with my rabbi. Yeah. He was bringing it up. And there's another consistency. You'll see, they'll say the land of the Jews, which actually they mixed the word, the English mixed the word because it went into the interior, into Mali and southern Libya, back when it was a little, more trade routes and stuff were going on through there. And it said the land of the Jews. So they marked it on that map. That's one of their famous things they like to mark from 1729 or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But you're seeing, again, I think...
you're getting distracted. Just ignore the live chat. You don't got to answer all these. No, this is just you got.
I got you.
You got ADHD, bro.
Yeah,
Come on,
I know.
Just relax.
No, so you had the Hebrew Israelite groups that were they're making this claim that they're part of them, but again, it goes back to in Puerto Rico, there's a little island off of Puerto Rico, and they speak Ladino. What is Ladino? Ladino is a mix of Hebrew, some Aramaic, and Spanish, because always everywhere we go, like in Iraq, they had a language called Iraqite. It wasn't quite Arabic, but it was mixed with Gomer language, and it was mixed with Hebrew, Aramaic.
I've heard people call it Yiddish for that part of the world.
Yiddish?
No, not that it's literally Yiddish.
Yeah.
Not that it's literally Yiddish.
Okay, how about this? Even in Yiddish, right?
Yeah.
My rabbi speaks Hungarian Yiddish, right? And then you have German Yiddish. All of its base is Hebrew and Aramaic, but a large portion of wherever it is you settled, you now have a dialect of Yiddish that's American. Because they don't use the word window. I don't know what window is, let's say, in Yiddish, but this is the example that the Rav gave us. They use window here in the English, and then they'll say everything else in Yiddish, like this German mish with Aramaic and Hebrew. But in Hungary, they had a different word for window. You know what I mean? The Polish had a different style. So they have an island that's off the coast of Puerto Rico where there was like, they estimate it was about 15 to 20 men, some women, but they took women that were already on Puerto Rico, and now we're not sure if they're Jewish at all, because most likely they're not, because you just had mostly men that were there, Jewish men, but they still speak Ladino. So there's a misconception that, oh, they must be Jewish because they're speaking an ancient Jewish type language. But again, if comes down to where if your mother's not Jewish, you're not Jewish. You know what I mean? Right. And this is where they make a lot of, like, when you look at these charts, when they say Colombia to Uruguay, where's the Puerto Rico one? Yeah, Ephraim. Yeah, when they say Ephraim is Puerto Ricans, they like to use one of those things is, well, there's an island that they still speak I was going to say, Hebrew there.
Just so you know, the stuff you're saying right now is music to the Hebrew Israelites' ears.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. It can be music to all they want. But again, where is the documentation with the women? And are you even keeping anything? Because you go to these islands and they don't even, they're not lighting Shabbos candles or Shabbat candles. They're not putting on tefillin.
You're talking about the cultural practices don't match any
exactly.
kind of...
You have to come... Think about this. You go back, 4,700 years to Abraham, right? Lineage-wise, that's what I'm talking about. On my family, other families. And all of a sudden, a woman comes into the picture. She says she's Jewish, but nothing is matching up. Are you willing to risk all that? That's what it comes down to. So a lot of these groups, they're doing these things, and some of it's actually mixing. They're trying to mix in, and I can get to a story like that in Israel. Somebody actually got ousted because they were associated with Dowell, I believe, because they were defending him when I had my argument with them. And they said in Jamaica, they go back like seven generations and blah, 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 blah.
Somebody's putting the Hebrew version of whatchamacallit, I think, in there.
No, sorry. Amichai, you know how it is. If I'm from New York, you know how it is. We always say whatchamacallit. Miscall.
Yeah, Tyler Lott mentions documents and references.
Exactly. When I went to go get Israeli citizenship, do you know... Well, that's another political issue over there, because they're like letting... By the way, I'm just as fanatic about this with like the Black Hebrew Israelites making these claims and these like Russians and Ukrainians that are coming to Israel.
Oh, yeah.
Most of them aren't even Jewish. Like half of them had Nazi borderline grandparents that were beating our grandparents in pogroms.
So, yeah, I've been hearing about... like under the right of return stuff, that there's a lot of Russian folks who have been, I think they're clamping down on it now, but basically using it as a way to sneak into Israel. To get a better life economically.
Yeah, all economic.
And it turns out a lot of them aren't Jewish.
At all.
Yeah.
Like there's a guy, he's at the Kotel, he has a kippah on, swastika on the back of his neck. It's crazy. It's a photo that floats around on the internet. It's another interesting one, too. There's with the Ethiopians that are coming, depending on which lift that you came into Israel, and this came from a friend of mine, she's Ethiopian, and she had said, she was like, listen, when we were kids and we were trying to come in, we saw people dropping their crosses just to get out of Ethiopia during the famines in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s. You know what I mean? So she said, a lot of them, you got to be careful. They're not even Jewish, and they're in Israel and they're wearing crosses. They're not Jewish at all. And I'm not saying because they wear a cross, because they went back to their original, what they really, really were. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, but of course, you could hypothetically have Semitic DNA, but then practice a different faith, of course. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah,
but also too, like typically not to be stereotypical, but there's typically like a look also. You know what I mean? Like you could let's say this: when she did her DNA, 49% Yemen, and we know that there's a large Jewish population just across the Horn of Africa there in Yemen, or it was like 60,000 people. So again, we're seeing consistencies, and we're seeing, communities being kept with one another,
Yeah, live chat got a lot of interesting discussion here. Shout out to Carm, shout out to D-New, shout out to Nate, shout out to Wawa, as I mentioned before. Those are some great mods. Shout out to In Context with Jim Green. Everyone subscribe to him. And shout out to everyone else up in here. Okay, any of these other books you wanna show us that you brought?
Kuzari is always a good one. Crash Course in Jewish History is a good one also. There's also another good one. The Rishonim, And what the Rishonim talks about is it's basically all the early rabbis from the 10th century to the 18th century, just for more historical context and pogroms, persecutions, thought, things like this, you know. That's for an educational purpose for people who are interested in Jewish history, Jew or not, doesn't really matter. But just kind of like basic, simple, historical context. I mean, because again, you can go, like I said, into the Kuzari, and they're going to give you at the bottom of the page the source where like there was an excavation to prove these things. Like when they found coins on an island off of Sweden, and it showed the Kuzari, and it has a Magan David, a Star of David on it. You know what I mean? So at one point, they were a prominent, trading nation at one point. So there is a history. And there's a history of Jews in America. There was a history of Jews in Germany. There was a history of Jews in Morocco. It's not like some huge, I did it again. It's not a huge conspiracy, you know? So
thank you to Purely Grounded for the super chat. Thank you very much. Shout out to you. Holding it down, much appreciated.
What does she say? The Russians were known to be non-Jews in the 1980s. Yeah, the 1980s ones was a big issue. Ethiopian Jews have the same DNA as non-Ethiopian Jews. The Ethiopian... No. See, I disagreed on that because I saw the DNA report on somebody.
Yeah, we're making some really broad statements there. And so, there's a lot...
I think there's still 150,000 Jews in Russia still today.
Yeah, it's not like there's none. I mean, my goodness, that is a real thing. We're gonna. I
never saw the Star of David. When was it used by the Jews? The Star of David, Truth Defenders. Okay, here we go. Magan also can mean shield, so it was like the shield of Avraham. It was the same thing. That's the argument. I hear that argument before. We do it every morning in our prayers when I put on tefillin. We say the shield of Avraham, Magan David, or Magan Avraham. Star of David, was it used by the Jews? I think it has something to do with going into war. I think that's it. When you have a shield, I would imagine, right? Or are we talking figuratively on a spiritual matter? I'd have to look into it more. Yeah, Gomer, my dad is from Crown. What?
She's saying
Crown Heights. Is he Chabad?
I don't know. Good question.
He says whatchamacallit a lot. I wrote every time you said whatchamacallit. Israel takes a shot. Laugh out loud. Yep.
Yeah, just don't worry about the live chat. We're not, because then we'll just get bogged down. Hey, shout out to Thomas Carlisle for the super chat as well. Thank you very much, Thomas Carlisle, supporting the channel. Very much appreciated. Shout out to you. Okay, so if you could give a message to Hebrew Israelites to try to change their mind, what would you want to tell them?
I think the message more goes to people who are looking into it. Okay. Because unfortunately, a lot of times when people are in it, if we all sit in the room together and you got 10 of us and we all say we're the best, most likely the 10 of them are going to start to believe it and hype it up. But when you're from the outside, you're just like looking, well, you got 10 guys in a room saying they're the best, but you got a whole world out there who can maybe prove to them they're not the best. Let's say it like throwing a ball, right? Because there's going to be somebody from the outside. That's the problem with, I don't think there's too much you can do to try and pull people out. But again, you just got to look at your leaders and look at the consistency. You know what I mean? In the context of what they're saying. Are they reading the whole chapter, word for word, breaking it down from the original text? And if they speak Hebrew, are they reading it correctly? So yeah.
All right. What do you want to say to the Christians in the audience regarding these issues? Like, you got a lot of Christians watching.
Yeah, that's true. Wow. It depends. So it depends, because like I don't know. It's weird. I'm not really. I'm usually not in the mix with Christians too much, to be honest with you.
You don't have many Christian friends?
Not that when I say I don't have that many friends, but like I work all the time. Like I run a business. I have a real estate development thing I'm also doing.
No, I'm saying Christian friends or Christian associates.
Man, most of them are just pretty chill with me. Like as far as what you're saying, they're pretty chill with me. Where are we going? What would I say? I guess.
Well, if you don't have many Christian friends, I need to give you a book on.
Okay, how about this? I can say, because me and you have these conversations.
Yeah.
obviously, I just say don't believe the hype as far as, when you got a group of people screaming. How about this? If you have truth, this is what I'll say to the Christians. If you have truth, right? We know that Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, they all had a covenant with God. Avraham in particular, he had a covenant with God. We know the God of Israel is the only God of truth, of light, everything, right? Somebody who has to deliver that message, I don't think you can stand on a street corner and, borderline get physical, not only with other people, but within themselves, as we've seen recently with videos that are surfacing. That's not very godlike in that sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's nothing that's leadership about the things that they do when you think about it. They're usually alienating people. And in many situations, they talk about family and all these kinds of things. If anything, I've seen them break up families more than they've actually, brought people together.
That's definitely true.
I'm saying from my experience with watching, multiple people, not just one person in particular, they usually alienate themselves from mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters. They make crazy accusations against everybody. If you don't, me personally, I'm not going to support horrible behavior like nightclubs and things like this, right? I'm not going to support that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to go to my sister and say, if you do it, you're like ready to get they'll pull somewhere out of the Torah or out of the Tanakh where you can like behead them, borderline. You know what I mean? They use things to justify and switch to their ways, and I'm just not going to get involved in that.
So what about what if you have Jewish people watching? What do you want to tell them?
Okay, who is that's a wide thing. If you got somebody who's like totally off the derech, like not on the path of Hashem, or I know you're a Christian and stuff, but I will say this: if some of them converted, go talk to your local Orthodox rabbi, and come back to Am Yisrael, because this is it. Like, we're in the times of Mashiach. It's very clear, and this has never been a better time in history to This has never been a better time in history. We are watching history unfold in front of us.
This is the best time to be a Jew?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
You heard it here, folks.
I'm going to tell you something. We have an army now. And now I already know the guys, some of the guys in these chats and stuff like that. They're going to lose their mind by saying, well, that's because the United States gives them all this money. Look what happened to the Spanish Empire after they kicked the Jews out. Look what happened to the Egyptians after they kicked the Jews out. We're seeing, again, a consistency and a pattern that are happening.
You're saying when you kick the Jews out, then you lose your empire.
Bereshit, Genesis 12:3. I'll bless those who bless me, and I'll curse those who curse me. It's very clear. We have that arov thing I told you about when I was in California. All the homeless used to damage it. The day I put that on there, I wrote on there, I will bless those. Nobody ever touched it again. You know what I'm saying? There's power to these things. There's power to the words.
So, man, I need to put one of those in my yard instead of just no loitering, and then maybe the little, what's it called, muzah?
Yeah. Oh, mezuzah, like a mezuzah.
So they'll be like, oh, don't want to mess with that house.
Real quick, I'll address this. Jewish people criticize JC. That's anti-Semitism. It's very interesting. I'm not saying that he hates us, but people will hate us, but they all follow a Jew. It's the weirdest thing, you know what I mean? I find that pretty interesting.
Well, I'm pretty sure there's a Hebrew Israelite. He says, Jewish ain't the people. That's the truth. Not all Israel's of Israel.
Okay,
but
Jewish,
I don't know.
Jewish ain't the people. Okay, well, I'm wondering if one of these kind of guys are the ones who also say, are you a Jew or Jewish? Well, there's a thing called singular and plural. You are Yehud or Yehudim. It's the same concept. It's just translated over into English. And they also like to say, here's another one they like to say. Remember we were talking the 10 tribes? There's two different arguments, that they're out there and there's some mystical land that a bunch of them are sitting in.
Yeah.
Or again, I go with the reality. They probably intermixed with non-Jews because they were outcasted.
Yeah.
But you did have, in Jerusalem, you had delegates, and about 10% of each tribe was living in and around Jerusalem with Judah. So the argument is we're going to find out in the times of Mashiach who is what tribe that you come from. So that's one of the arguments that they like to say, or one of the schools of thought that they like to say. So when they try and say, like when we're looking at this ridiculous chart, Colombia to Uruguay, Asher and stuff like this, they're not just going to pull them out from all the way over there. It's probably going to be, you're going to have people who are well known to be Jewish, and they're going to pull out the tribe from there. And who knows, that could be done with DNA for all we know, through certain genetic markers.
Interesting. And so do you think should you were interested in some of like the work I was doing because originally you had reached out to me.
Yeah.
So what made you interested to talk to a good old Christian guy about this kind of stuff in the first place? Because that's kind of interesting how that happened.
I like the good work because
Thank you.
education is everything.
Thank you.
Fighting against people who literally, like you said, I mean, they roll like a mob on a street corner. You told me you've been in Chicago with like 40 on one side, 40 on the other.
Yeah, GMS, they were.
Yeah, and there's nothing in the Torah that says you have to do that. People all the time that the Jewish people, Israelites, Hebrews, depending on the timeline, right? All the time that they won these wars, it's when we were honoring God, and all the times that we didn't, like with the spies and stuff like this, we lost. This is just how it goes. So if you're going in the light of truth to go against people who are pretty much speaking nothing but hate in many ways, because when you look at their arguments, it's never good for anyone who's not like them. It's always like fire and brimstone, and you're going to get like ripped apart by demons in their eyes. You know what I mean?
Well, if you're talking about one Westers, they don't believe, most of them, in the concept of hell, if that's what you're referring to. Most of them believe that the other nations will be their slaves forever, and that would include who they would call Amalekites.
Yeah.
That's what they say. But some of the other ones who are maybe more moderate, they'll say, no, we're not going to put them in slavery, but the other nations will be in their place, and then they'll have to, give us our stuff, like yearly tribute, and we're going to teach the other nations the Torah finally, So some of them say that, which I think a lot of Jews would believe as well.
100%.
So the moderates, so One West is not a good example of Hebrew Israelism in the sense of it's an extreme position. However, there's a lot of them. You know what I mean? But the moderate ones basically have their position just flipped.
Yeah.
They would say it'll kind of almost be like a student-teacher relationship, parent-child relationship, which, like I said, that in and of itself is something that I think a lot of Jews would say too. So,
I can tell you this: when you look at the points you were just saying, all their talking points when they're the more moderate types. I'm wondering if they're not getting this stuff from like YouTube, because there is rabbis who have lectures and stuff on these types of things, and they talk about the times of Mashiach. Now, when Mashiach comes, it's going to be so obvious that the whole world is going to know that we were right the whole time in the sense of like the message of the Torah, because Torah just means instructions and the way you're supposed to conduct yourself. Does this guy believe in JC? No. Sorry. I have to get that out there. I'm openly an Orthodox Jew.
I think that's been pretty. Well, I think he might have just joined.
Okay.
Because it's been pretty, clear the whole time.
Yeah.
Obviously. But we've had interesting conversations here. As well.
Well, also too with the Shanit thing. What does it say? If you're talking about Tomer, no, Jews do not believe in the Greek demigod. I'm not going to bash anybody on this either. From a historical context, you'll hear people who will say he existed, he didn't exist. I'm not going to sit there and bash people what they believe as far as JC goes.
Well, Josephus mentions Jesus.
Yeah, and also in the Talmud, there was 3 different Jesuses that were mentioned. Now, they like to say that
there's a specific one. It's the one that sometimes is slurred as being Ben Pantera. So in the Talmud, it slurs Jesus as being the son of a Roman soldier. So, there's polemics in the Talmud that are from later date when they were finally codified or written down, but they're from earlier times. And so there's whole studies on Jesus in the Talmud, and there's whole studies on the Josephus passages on Jesus. So here's what I'm saying about that is we could have a discussion about the messianic credentials of Jesus, but to say he didn't exist is a non-historical, non-academic position.
No, I wouldn't say that. Usually,
because the Talmud's going out of its way to slur him for a reason. It says he taught Israel magic. It says that there's a whole.
I have to see it. Yeah, I would have
to
see
I could show you some of the sections. Jesus is definitely slurred pretty hard. But what? Can I tell you the worst one? What the Talmud says about Jesus?
What?
It says he's boiling in hot excrement and semen.
Yeah. Now,
and that's all referring to. It's not. Now, there's sometimes scholars are not certain. In some of these other cases, I haven't mentioned all the cases where they're not sure who it's talking about because, as you know, the rabbis and the sages like to speak in code.
Yes.
But the ones I'm talking about are much more clear passages.
This I'd have to see. One.
Yeah. There's whole. I've done. I'm not saying I'm expert, but I've done some studies on it. Jesus definitely. But the point by that is saying that even opponents of Jesus recognized he existed.
Yeah,
You
no.
know.
Also, too, the other thing too is when the Romans were conquering Israel, the latter half of their conquer, because at first it was okie dokie, like no problems. But in the later days of Roman occupation, the what do they do? In the later days of
Well, I mean,
Roman
they
occupation.
put Herod in charge.
Well, yeah, and that was pretty brutal.
An Edomite who killed his own family.
Yeah. So wait, you had the Romans in charge. They were completely butchering and killing Jews. Every time that we've seen Jewish history, like Shabtai Tzvi in the 1600s, he claimed to be the Messiah. There was a whole movement that was starting to follow him, only to be later conquered by the whatchamacallit, by the I think it was the Muslims coming in from the Moors or something like that, only for him to convert to Islam. So what usually happens is a lot of these situations where things are really, really low at a spiritual level, there's usually a leader who will come and pick them up.
How about this guy?
Who's that?
I'm gonna show Tomer in a second here.
Yeah.
This
I
is
know.
my friend is in New York, and he literally sent me this. It's a picture of an RV in Manhattan.
Yeah, so it's called Chabad. They do amazing things in the sense of chesed, charity, things like this. There are some people who say he was Mashiach, but overwhelmingly, 99% of them, overwhelmingly, don't believe that. Don't believe that at all. And a lot of people take, like, what does it say on the side? It doesn't say he is Mashiach. I am Mashiach. He doesn't make that claim. Mashiach is coming now, which has been a consistent thing, again, throughout Jewish history, that we're always looking for Mashiach. We're always looking for the Redeemer to come.
Yeah, Mashiach is coming now.
Yeah, so it doesn't say, like, this rabbi is Mashiach. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you think we'll be able to? So you think Messiah is still coming? Do you think it's a problem or not that, prior to 70 AD, there was some ability to have genealogies to show this is the son of David, but now you wouldn't be able to do such a thing?
no, there's like big Rebbeim here in the world still. They have, like, paperwork and stuff to show that they came from King David. Okay, how about this, Rashi?
You're saying there's people that you could know for sure that they have paperwork that goes all the way back to 900 BC.
Yes, King
So
David.
I don't know if that's true or not.
Not King David. Rashi.
Yeah.
He was a descendant of King David, and you can go back by
Yeah.
villages, family names. Well, not just family names, but yeah, there's Rabbi. You got to talk to Rabbi Toby Singer on this one. Somebody like him, because he has sources for the. I'm just like a regular guy. I work, I learn an hour a night, and I go home. You know what I mean? 3-4 nights a week. I'm just a regular guy. And they said JC was not a Jew. I never made that claim.
Yeah. So let me deal with that. So, Christos is a Greek word for anointed. That's true, and the New Testament does say Jesus is the Son of God. But what are you talking about in Greek? A demigod.
By the way,
that's where you lost me at.
Michelle, I'm not a Messianic Jew. No, not at all.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think she's hearing you refer to Mashiach. Yeah, I think.
Mashiach. Yeah.
I think that's why she. So he doesn't believe that Jesus was the Christ.
And I'm not going to worship the.
No, you're getting distracted by all these comments.
It's insane. There's
But help me understand. When you have the early followers of Jesus to the commoner, you have the early followers of Jesus were Jewish themselves.
Yeah, of course.
And they didn't understand themselves to be working or worshiping or following a demigod. They understood themselves, and now you could say they're wrong. That's fine. That's a different discussion. But they understood themselves, and how do we know from their writings? Because they tell us they didn't understand themselves to be worshiping a Greek demigod or something like that. They understood themselves to be worshiping, following the fulfillment of the Old Testament scriptures. And they said that this man fulfills these Old Testament scriptures, these prophecies about who the Messiah would be, such as places like Isaiah 53, Psalm 22, and of course, the New Testament will make the claim Isaiah 7:14. There's obviously a lot more to discuss, Psalm 2:7. And then understood him to be identified with the God of Israel strictly. So I'm just saying we could have our disagreements. Shina, I don't know if that's how you say your name, but we want to do so with knowledge. I think that helps, Judaism has no idea about Jesus. What does that mean? No place in Judaism for Jesus.
Well, I mean,
What does that mean?
the various Christian churches slaughtered us for many millennia now, a couple millennia. So, well, I'll give you the benefit of the
Well,
doubt.
I mean,
1,500 years.
I
So we
mean,
know.
but who? What? So like, I'm part of a church. It doesn't go back 1,500 years.
Who? Which one?
You know what I'm saying? The Reformed Church.
Which one? Or how long? How far back? Are you talking like Martin Luther and these types? Because he was very anti-Semitic.
Yeah. So Martin Luther, obviously, that's where you get the Lutherans from.
Mm-hmm.
Luther was Semitic. That's true, and some of that anti-Semitic influence, obviously, was unhelpful to say the least in what happened in Germany. But I mean, it's an overstatement because you also have the hiding place.
What do you mean?
The hiding place. This is a famous book and movie. Corrie ten Boom and their family. These are people who built these fake walls in their attic to hide. These are Christians
For sure.
and so,
for sure.
So it's to like, oh well, just Christians are, it's like who also is doing this over here,
Yeah, but more times than not, just like we learned during COVID, people just get complacent. You know what I mean? That's what we saw.
Yeah, that's true. And
Unfortunately,
they allow evil to prosper or to happen or occur. That is true.
Yeah,
that is true.
And more times than not, that seems to be the case. Unfortunately, very few, like you said, the family who hid people in the walls and stuff like that. That tended to be fewer than not. I was at a job.
Yes, there definitely should be a lot more. But that's part of the problem, too, when you have a society that will say we're Christian. So you have this thing that you might call Christendom, where there's like almost like a civil or civic religion. But if that's like the sort of like a cultural or societal glaze over a culture, does that really mean these people in these cultures are actually Christians? You know what I'm saying? Because I'm saying you could say, oh yeah, we're it's like in name only or nominal. If you have a society that says we're a Christian, but that doesn't really mean they're Christian as far as like beliefs or practices or anything like that.
For sure, you can have a pastor, a rabbi, and an imam. And how many times do we see them where they're like, stealing money from the congregation? That's human nature.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, and also too, that might be part of a test. There's a lot of things. Every day is a test in our life. You know what I mean? This goes back to midot, where you're working on your character. You know what I mean? That's the biggest thing. What do we got?
Shauna, real quick, I just want to. So a demigod is the son of God. So again, Shauna, you are not looking at the context. The context is not within a Greek pantheon. So the context is within Jews who are monotheists. That's the New Testament context. So you're mixing and matching the context of the New Testament itself. These were not pagan Greeks writing this and following this man. That's not the case. And Christos being a Greek word, that doesn't mean anything. I'm sure if you're as knowledgeable as you intimate, you understand the Septuagint. The Septuagint, which existed a couple hundred years before Jesus Christ. It's the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures. And in the Septuagint, what happens there? Do you see the word Christos? Yes, you do. You see the very word you're talking about. So that's not a good argument, the fact that it's Greek word alone, because it's in the Septuagint as well. And so describing Jesus as a child half God and half human, I'm going to be frank with you, is totally ignorant. You can disagree with Christianity, but at least know what we believe. The belief is that Jesus is conceived of a virgin, and Matthew 1:23 says, fulfilling Isaiah 7:14, and is fully God, fully man. It's not what you're talking about. If you read the accounts where Zeus impregnates women, it's nothing like that. So we can lock arms in some ways, but you should know what you're critiquing. Otherwise, you just sound uninformed, frankly. Now, I didn't want to get too much with that, but here's a great guy, Radar Apologetics. He's a great guy. It's a channel I recommend you subscribing to. Shout out to you, brother. So final words, man, and we got to get out of here because we're going over our time.
Oops. I think it's better if you're trying to fall into one of these groups, maybe take a step back, look from the outside. It's very enticing because it gives you a sense of feeling belonged. But any time that you find yourself where you're having to separate yourself from your loved ones, especially when they're not really bad people. Let's say you just disagree with something on it philosophically, but they're not like hurtful people. You know what I mean? Maybe some of their actions can rub off and be hurtful later on, but it's better to lead by example than to try and change everyone. It's going to be easier if you do the right thing. You follow the Torah, you read what it says, and you try and go this direction. it's going to be easier and less painful for yourself, because in the end, you're going to lose. I promise you. You cannot give up your entire family and write everybody off and then go hide out with, or not even hide out. You know, these guys are here in this city. We know these different groups and stuff like that. You're not going to do anything. You'll end up only alienating yourself, and 20, 30 years will go by and you'll be alone in the end. That's what's going to end up happening when you follow into groups like this.
Yes, indeed. So, you know, we just wanted to have an interesting discussion today. You know, it's live, it's in person, it's happening right now. And so we wanted to say, okay, let's talk about these issues from each of our perspectives and shed a little light on, you know, personal things that have happened with you and people you know and care about. And I like being able to do that. That's one good thing about the internet. People can come together, hopefully, and then have good, helpful, educational conversations, and they may not always agree, and that's okay. We can learn from each other, even if we don't see eye to eye. And at the end of the day, you know, I want to love my neighbor as myself by God's grace. And so I would hope I would do everything I could to be an ally and a light and a witness and an example. And hopefully we can talk more about that, Tomer. So thank you very much for joining today. Shout out to the live chat. Listen, everybody, tomorrow I'm doing a debate with Captain Tazariak right on Garfield Breed's channel, so you don't want to miss it. It's going to be 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and after that, I'm going to go on Sanetta's channel and do a post-debate review. Fascinating stuff happening tomorrow. I need to get some sleep. All right, y'all. God bless. Peace out. Thank you again.